So, as I said, my name is Christian Fernandez, and I'm joined here by my SFE team, Sarah Kane with the North Carolina State University, and David Godwin with the University of Florida. And today we're excited to feature a joint presentation by James Furman with the U.S. Forest Service and Daniel Galtieri with the Ember Alliance. James and Dan will be giving an overview and history of the Integrated Research Management Team, a novel framework for integrating wildland fire research and management. As we said earlier, our presenters today are James Furman and Daniel Galtieri. James Furman currently serves as a U.S. Forest Service liaison to the Department of War's wildland fire programs. Prior to accepting his U.S. Forest job in 2013, he served as a wildland fire program manager at Eglin Air Force Base for 15 years, where he tripled Eglin's prescribed fire program output to 135 prescribed fires and more than 100,000 acres per year. Through his support of fire science research at Eglin Air Force Base, and later his Department of War supported work with Los Alamos National Laboratory, he has become something of a poster child for the co-production of science between researchers and fire managers. He currently leads the Department of War funded projects supporting the Integrated Research Management Team, the subject of today's webinar, to facilitate wildland fire research. And Dan Galtieri is the Director of Fire Management for the Ember Alliance. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Ecology from the University of Florida, where he was first introduced to prescribed fire. After several years working as a biologist, Dan joined the Department of War Fire Management Program, serving for 15 years in a variety of leadership roles. As a fire planner, burn boss, and firefighter, he has worked across the country in moderate and high complexity suppression and prescribed fire programs. Prior to his current role, Dan served as the coordinator for the Integrated Research Management Team, supporting the development and implementation of wildland fire science and technology through co-production with researchers and fire managers. In his current role at the Ember Alliance, he leads efforts to build and support high-performing fire management programs that connect operational crews with applied science and landscape-scale fire management. Welcome, James and Dan. We're excited to have you with us today, and just one moment as we trade out our presentations.
If I can get it to where I can see it here. So, all right. So, first off, thanks to the Southern Fire Exchange for having Dan and I on, and yeah, there's a interesting background to the Integrated Research Management Team, the evolution of it, and I'll be talking kind of about the the when and the why and the what and a little bit about the who, and then Dan will dive in a little more on the kind of the how it's done. He'll get into the nitty-gritty of kind of what's going on in these different campaigns. And so yeah, it really, they say good things take time, and really the concept that led to the IRMT began in 2027 or 2007 rather at something called the Core Fire Science Group. And it was in Madison, Wisconsin, and they talked about the need, all the different parts of fire are like an interrelated puzzle. I mean, the weather affects the fuels, which affects the fire behavior, which affects the smoke dispersion. And then you throw in the firing pattern, the ignition pattern chosen by the burn boss or firing boss on a prescribed fire. And so you've got all these different pieces, each of which is complex in their own right, but they're all interconnected. And so at the Core Fire Science Caucus in Madison, Wisconsin in 2007, group of folks got together, some names that are probably common to a number of folks here, Kevin Hires, Morgan Varner, I think Joe O'Brien was there from Southern Research Station, Roger Ottmar, Nick Skowronski, and a number of others. I'm sure I'm missing some, but they talked about the need to really get together on pre-planned prescribed fire events. Everyone, the different research teams come in and actually work together so that they can share their data, because measuring all these different things for one specific research team is just too much, too much instrumentation, too much workload. And so almost by default, you've got all these different research teams that need to come in and kind of play together in the sandbox well. So, core concept was decided we need to do this, and especially, with even back in 2007, there was realization that we needed to be doing more prescribed fire throughout the country, especially on federal lands where there's a huge backlog. And with most of the federal lands located west of the Mississippi River, where, wildfire is the big driver, it was really identified that, we need to be looking at prescribed fire science. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. But, Department of Defense, and I'll keep going with DoD because, it was DoD up through most of the time frame that I'll be talking about. The Department of Defense has a particular interest in prescribed fire and what came to be known as prescribed fire science because, necessity being the mother of invention, you know, the Department of Defense's training and testing mission starts a lot of wildfires. And so, prescribed fire is a key part of risk management on DoD installations. So, with that, I mean, actually, DoD on a per acre basis burns more by an order of magnitude compared to any of the other federal wildland fire agencies. So prescribed fire is extremely important from a mission support standpoint. So, also back 2007, 2008, Joint Fire Science Program dollars were kind of drying up. And so the DoD started investing in some prescribed fire science. So after the 2007, in 2008, there at Eglin Air Force Base and at the J.W. Jones Ecological Center had sort of, I mean, some first fairly small attempts at bringing several research teams together to work together, collecting data on prescribed fires, and it was successful. They were fairly small, just several research teams, and then in 2011 and 12, because things went well in 2008, had some larger campaigns at Eglin, and again. I think there was a smaller one at the Jones Center, but these were huge campaigns. The one in 2011, I was actually the Wildland Fire Program Manager there, and we had 100 researchers, including international researchers coming in. Had Eglin's test wing was involved, flying UAS, aerial ignition, huge, huge operation. And there were a lot of lessons learned in 2011 and 2012 uh, in what came to be known as the RX cadre experiments. So one of the main lessons learned was our small fire staff at Eglin was overwhelmed with the workload associated with coordinating all these different research projects and everything coming in. I mean, we managed the incident, I'll call it an incident, through the principles of incident command system, which fire managers are familiar with, but we simply did not have enough people and realized then that if we were ever going to do this again at Eglin, we needed to have some outside help. And so in 2012 was about the time that DoD started investing more heavily in prescribed fire science in what became known as the DoD Wildland Fire Science Initiative. And the triangular emblem that you see up in the left-hand corner, that's actually the logo for the DoD Wildland Fire Science Initiative. And much of it was in fundamental science, but then starting in about 2016 and between 2016 and 2019, DoD's environmental research programs, they invested in a number of projects, separate projects that required measurements on active prescribed fires. And as these projects were getting kicked off, it became apparent, and especially from the lessons learned earlier, that we need a team to help manage this. And of course, I had been at Eglin, Kevin Hires had been at Eglin, but myself and Joe O'Brien and Nick Skowronski, uh, put together a proposal for the integrated research management team. I was principal investigator. They were my two co-principal investigators. Uh, Joe working at the Southern Research Station, and Nick Skowronski worked at the Northern Research Station. And they had also been involved, all the way through, since 2007, 2008. They've been involved in all the campaigns. During that time period, there was also the Prescribed Fire Science Consortium that was put together that included, many of these same names that I have talked about up to this point. But, bottom line, in 2020, the Integrated Research Management Team project was funded through DoD's environmental program. And so the actual objective, this is copy pasted directly from the proposal that was submitted and approved and funded. And just a second, get my camera down here where I can see it. And so so develop an integrated system to maximize collaboration, personnel safety, probability of success, overall positive impact of the DoD Wildland Fire Science Initiative, while providing proof of concept for an integrated research management team as a national model via successful establishment and implementation. So, that is what we were tasked to do, and my hopes are that you'll agree at the end of this that we have been successful in doing that. The pictures here, just some images from some of the earlier campaigns, just showing, and this is just fire behavior mostly, showing some of what Joe O'Brien's team is measuring at the sub-centimeter scale, both infrared and visible, sub-canopy, as compared to high-resolution aerial imagery, as compared to satellite. Been a really important thing that these campaigns have accomplished, looking at that integration and calibration between those three different elevations of measuring fire behavior. So in the diagram that we're looking at here, the gray ovals are it represents kind of the data pathways. Starting at the bottom is these collaborative research campaigns, like the RX Cadre and the Prescribed Fire Science Consortium, FASME, the DoD Wildland Fire Science Initiative. So, that data collection during these campaigns is really foundational for the validation and refinement of next generation physics-based fire behavior and smoke models. And these physics-based models are what's required really to take into account ignition patterns and to better illustrate interactions between fire and the atmosphere as related to prescribed fire behavior. In other words, being able to model the difference between how a strip head fire is going to burn versus a flanking fire versus a point source ignition, really refining these tools for the manager. So that data is then fed in. I'll also mention on the diagram, the rectangles are these various next generation tools that are being developed. Fast fuels, which is the high resolution three-dimensional fuel bed that feeds into these next generation fire models like quick fire, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. It also feeds into quick smoke, VR training, visual reality, fire training for prescribed fire scenarios. So, in addition to, the supporting these models, they also need the IRMT for, taking the workload off the host unit. I can tell you after 2011 and 2012, we were burnt. I mean, it was really intense workload, and not many places would be the glutton for punishment that we were at Eglin Air Force Base as far as taking on that additional workload. So the IRMT, an important part of what it does is serves as the primary point of contact, a single point of contact rather than, getting bombarded by, 20 different research scientists. IRMT is a single point of contact for the host unit, and provides advantages and benefits to the host unit through sponsoring co-production activities where the managers actually have the opportunity to provide feedback directly to the researchers. And the researchers very interested in the feedback from the managers in this co-production cycle. Uh, so, anyway, so taking workload off the host unit, obviously integrating all these different data sets, harmonizing the data so that it all can be used as a unified data set for validation of these next generation of fire and physics models, and just the logistics. If you've got 100 researchers out in the field, somebody's got to supply porta potties and transportation and maps and all of those kinds of things. So, kind of also, with regard to, why an integrated uh, management team, you know, fire managers understand incident command system. They understand the value of an incident action plan, and developing an incident action plan is one of the primary services provided by the IRMT. In addition to months of pre-planning prior to the actual events, for the events, the integrated or an incident action plan or IAP is developed. On the right-hand side of your screen, that's actually a screen capture of the front page of our campaign from last year. And you can see the number of different organizations and agencies that were involved in this campaign. The QR code in the middle would take folks directly to a folder that has not only all of the pages of the IEP, but also maps that could be downloaded for the researchers. So, communications plan, transportation plan, safety, uh, ambulance connection points, medical plan, all of that's included. Um, and the Venn diagram in the center here uh, really illustrates kind of where the IRMT sits, and especially when we're working on military installations, you've really got three different cultures that are all sharing the same space. And each of these cultures, fire, research, DoD, they've got their own jargon, their own acronyms, their own policies, their own guidance, and the IRMT, on the IRMT, we have not only experienced fire managers, we have folks, like myself and others that have worked a lot, within DoD, and we've got researchers so that we serve as translators. Sometimes I actually end up being the jargon police to make sure that if anybody uses jargon in a briefing, I'll raise my hand and make them define that. So I just realized that my picture may be off a little bit here. So anyway, we're in the middle of all of this and just really take seriously, aiding communication for all these different folks that are involved. Now, in the lower left-hand side, I said I mentioned quick fire. This is actually a quick fire simulation based on the data that was gathered during the 2022 the first of our campaigns at Fort Stewart. It's got high resolution fast fuels data, the actual micrometeorology as measured on site as far as wind speed and direction and all of that. Fuel moistures as they were measured on site, the actual ignition pattern, not only the actual path that the helicopter flew, but also the speed at which they had the aerial ignition device set so that the density of ignitions is representative of what actually happened. And there's analysis being done now. There was also follow-up afterwards to actually record, how much was consumed of the fuels. And there's analysis being done now, seeing how well quickfire performs to what actually happened uh, during the course of the fire. And so a little bit about the WHO. This is actually the recent list of the of the members of the integrated research management team. And a couple of things that I'll point out. One is, as mentioned in the slide, over 600 years of experience within the IRMT. Much of that is fire management experience, but also, many decades of research, wildland fire research experience mixed in with that. And the couple of things also I wanted to point out, besides you kind of scroll down and see the all the different specialties and focus areas for the individuals. Near the bottom, you'll see liaisons for both the Eastern Innovation Landscape Network, the EILN, Brett Williams, who also, happened to be on the fire staff there at Eglin when I was there, but now U.S. Forest Service Tech Transfer Specialist in the Southern region. He leads the Eastern Innovation Landscape Network. The IRMT has played a key role in supporting those activities. And also, I've reached out to the NEMO teams. And for those not familiar with NEMO, that's the National Incident Management Organization teams. Uh, they're based out of Washington, D.C., in the Washington office. They are, you essentially incident management teams that are set up where they can take on longer duration projects. They do respond and like other incident management teams to support, wildfires in the West and those kind of things, but they also take on longer duration projects. And so, they could very easily fill in a role as an additional IRMT in the future if that was something they were interested in, but actively work with them uh, just to keep that door open and keep them in the loop on how things are going with the IRMT. So a little bit about the results to date. The key thing that's been produced is the Integrated Research Management Team Implementation Guide. It was a labor of love that, myself and many other members on the team contributed to, kind of, a breadcrumb trail for how to set up and operate an IRMT, taking into account all those lessons learned, over the course of these various campaigns that we've supported, so that, if I got hit by a truck tomorrow, someone would know how we did it and could start from scratch and build an integrated research management team. They also have successfully supported five, oh, acronym translation needed here. CERDIP is the Strategic Environmental Research Development Program. That's one of the environmental research programs uh, uh, that funds fundamental fire science. Most of the projects at these campaigns that are DoD funded are funded through CERDIP. Uh, the other project, or the other acronym that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, is ESTCP, since that's the program that funds the IRMT, since we're not getting enough acronyms here. The ESTCP is the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, which is a follow-on to the fundamental science. ESTCP is focused on getting tools in the hands of managers and supporting that transition to the tools. And so ESTCP has been the primary funding source for the IRMT. I mentioned earlier, we helped stand up the Eastern Innovation Landscape Network. And overall, the IRMT has been very well received within the research community. Has really been helpful in building networks between the various managers that are involved. So anyway, so far, so good. And business is good. Get calls on a regular basis talking about potential project going into the future. So uh, here is just a list of the uh, campaigns, the actual research campaigns that we have been involved with some imagery from the various campaigns. The very upper left, that was at the Tall Timbers. That was the first one that we did shortly after the IRMT was stood up. We did do broadcast burns, had UAS involved, but also had some of these smaller uh, the sort of prefab pine straw base burns for getting some basic measurements. Um, anyway, I won't go through all the pictures, but you can get a snapshot. I did want to mention though the center picture, and this is just one of the other things that the IRMT does. We found out that when these campaigns are scheduled, they gather a lot of attention, not only among the fire research community, but also leadership within different agencies that are involved with wildland fire research. And so we use these as an opportunity for leadership. Typically, there will be, a VIP tour, distinguished visitors, uh, and also workshops that are held, in conjunction uh, with these campaigns. And this is just an example of where, while the burn's going on and they're waiting, they can't go back in to retrieve instruments and stuff till it's over. We have the VIPs there, and the researchers get a chance to give their 5-minute elevator speech on what they're doing and answer questions. Just a great opportunity for kind of that further networking and getting folks in leadership uh, that networked as well, and really understanding the value of what's going on. So I would also be remiss if I didn't mention what a fantastic partner NASA has become. Um, the FireSense program in particular, they had attended the FASB burn and the 2024 campaign in a workshop and became very interested and actually played a key role and provided some funding for the IRMT for the 2025 campaign. And this is from their Avarice camera flying over the prescribed fire last year at uh, at Fort Stewart in Georgia. So yeah, they have aircraft flying and spaceborne, and that's kind of the part of it that they manage, and we manage everything below them, and also serve as their communication link to the operations on the ground so that they know exactly what time the fire is projected to start, when ignition begins, when ignition is complete, um, so that they can time their aircraft entries and their satellites to go along with that. And with that, I know I understand we're not going to go for questions now, but I just want to remind everybody there is a Q&A section, and we will turn it back over to Christian and Dan to finish things out here.
That's right. Thanks, James. Yeah, so we'll be switching on to Dan's presentation now.
Okay, just a second here. Well, thanks, James, and thanks to Southern Fire Exchange for having me and James here. My name is Dan Galtieri with the Amber Alliance. Very happy to be here talking about the IRMT and the work that we've been doing with them. This partnership is it's really been a strong partnership, and we're very grateful to all of our partners in the U.S. Forest Service, DOW, CERDUP, and the STCP for bringing us along and providing an opportunity for us to participate and provide the services that we do. I want to talk, like James said, about the current structure of the Integrated Research Management Team, a little bit about the Amber Alliance and who we are, and the work that we do, and then talk specifically about some of the campaigns and get into some of those details. So the Amber Alliance, we're a national nonprofit based out of Colorado, working across the nation. We are working in the space of prescribed fire science, and community capacity, as well as workforce development. And our vision is a world where communities thrive with fire, and our mission is to restore the relationship between communities and fire on the landscape. And from that perspective, we're very people focused. We believe that people are at the center of restoration and fire management, and that collaboration is at the core of our work, to bring about that restoration and fire management. So it's a natural intersection of our operational capabilities and the innovation in fire science. We're very practitioner first, and we're very much about connecting people with fire science and those operational entities with that fire science. So we bring capacity where agencies have gaps without replacing those agencies. So we can fill a role in between agencies, whether those are fed, state, or other nonprofits. And our model is really built around collaboration. So we can provide that force multiplier, specifically like we're talking today about incident management teams. So we work with incident management teams, we work with crews and land managers, and we really provide that subject matter expert and can be very flexible. So James talked quite a lot about this, so I won't go into too many details, but there's a few things that I wanted to point out when specifically talking about what the Ember Alliance brings and what the IRMT brings. So we talked about why an IRMT. There's obviously James said the logistical hurdles that come up when bringing that many researchers into a space that's already at a high operational tempo. We've talked about Fort Stewart, some of the other DOW sites, and the installations have their mission. And our goal is to not interrupt or interfere or disrupt any of those current operations, and really to dovetail in cleanly in an organized way to harmonize our operations alongside the host unit. And so oftentimes poor coordination between projects can create that risk for researchers when they're being introduced into that space. And so obviously, like any good incident management team, we're there to create order from the chaos, to prevent chaos, to prevent any of those questions from coming up, and then to really bring that harmony and connection between the research group and the host unit operations. So our core IRMT consists of 6 to 8 personnel filling standard command and general staff positions in the incident management team, and then we built that team out based on the scalability or the need that the incident would need. So we've done everything from small scale prescribed fire operations with just a handful of researchers on up to, like James mentioned, over 100 researchers convening on a site for a multi-week campaign. So utilizing that ICS system to scale and provide the services that are actually needed, and provide redundancy and training and a pipeline for building out our team as well. And so with our current structure, we function at the Ember Alliance with the IRMT similar to the federal casual hire process. The difference being that we keep a year-round core staff, but have the ability to supplement and build out that team as the need arises. And so we'll fill out with our partners, and we'll talk a little bit more. You saw that roster that James presented, but we'll fill out the team based on the need, and fill out some of those command and general staff positions. And so the advantage of the Ember Alliance as the host organization for the IRMT is that we can function in a cooperative and partnership with the federal agencies. We can leverage our non-federal status to fill gaps, and be flexible with our purchasing authorities, our recruitment strategies for building out the incident management team, and also rostering subject matter experts and bringing that force multiplier to build capacity and to move quickly. And so, like I mentioned, like any good incident management team, we have our campaign goal, we have our incident management team goals. So we're there to minimize researcher impact on burn operations, while providing opportunities for researchers to collect planned data. So like I mentioned, we want to have as small a footprint as we possibly can, while providing opportunities for researchers to safely collect data and foster co-production. And so you've heard James mention some of that before with the Eastern Innovation Landscape Network, and those opportunities to bring in observers and personnel who may not be necessarily involved in the prescribed burn or the research, but have vested interest in seeing the operation and building those relationships, and we create opportunities to safely integrate those people into the daily operations. And so you see here, this is our representation. This is a map of Fort Stewart where we've done several campaigns. And then, some of these photos are some of the opportunities that those campaigns provide. We have opportunities for roundtable discussions, um, training around some of the technology show and tell with the host units and their operations, so that other practitioners who are participating either on the team or as researchers can learn about other fire management programs and how they do business, and all of that collaboration happening around the prescribed fire that we're there to participate in. And so this is our organizational chart. And one thing that I wanted to point out here is that at the top of this chart is the burn boss at Fort Stewart, or whoever our campaign is, whether that's at another installation or at U.S. Forest Service or another partner site. We're there to support the fire management staff. We're there to work within their restrictions, their confines of what their a program does and how they operate. And so everything that happens after that is through the chain of command. And so we provide, as an incident management team, a structure to safely dovetail into the fire management operations at the host unit. And so, we ensure that research operations integrate within the planned prescribed fire. At the host installation, we follow the tenets of the incident command system, and we really preach that to the folks who are coming into this campaign who may not have any introduction to incident command system or have operated within that capacity. And so all of the pre-planning, the months of pre-planning up to the point of implementation is really connecting the researchers and the folks who are doing the on-the-ground work into that incident command system, so everyone knows their role, everyone knows where they're going to be, and that we have some flexibility in order to understand, some of the nuances of the research and make adjustments, because this is a planned event, and just because we've got a plan doesn't mean it always goes that way, but we have flexibility and communication lined out to make adjustments as the week goes on during the campaign. And so the liaison to the host fire management unit leads the IRMT. We have planning and pre-campaign documentation. We do daily briefings and on-site after-action reviews. And like James mentioned, producing the documentation of IAPs and some of the other standard documents that an incident management team would put together. One thing I wanted to point out on here as well, some of the trainee roles. Like I said, we're creating opportunities for folks to build depth within our structure. James mentioned 600 years of fire experience on the roster. That's knowledge that we want transferred and taught to other folks, whether they're within the research world or whether that's coming up within fire management. And so we create opportunities for trainees to build depth, to fill in roles, and expand that incident command structure as needed. And so the incident command system is the playbook, right? And so we're marching to the orders of what the incident command system provides, and teaching that to the folks that come on board on a prescribed fire campaign. It's a systematic approach in structure, and we're not trying to just do one single prescribed fire. We're trying to create an opportunity for multi-week campaigns, multiple prescribed fires, multiple complexities. And so utilizing the ICS provides synergy amongst the partners and that multi-level coordination that we need. I have to put my planning my planning specialist hat on here with the planning P, but we really kick off this planning phase with communication of a need from researchers or a group of researchers in order to express that need for a prescribed fire campaign or a series of prescribed fires. And so that usually comes through either connections from past research groups, a connection to the IRMT, or any of the initiatives that James was mentioning, the Wildland Fire Science Initiative and CERTIP and ESTCP. Within the community, the need is expressed, and this jumpstarts an outreach period where we're gathering information. The IRMT liaison is allowing an entry period for potential synergistic research activity for partners to express their need and for us to, as an IRMT, right size what we need from a planning perspective and an incident command perspective based on the need that's been expressed. And so we'll kick off that planning phase with a notification, an outreach period, and ask some earnest questions about what the campaign would entail and who would be involved, and that starts our information gathering session. I know, on your lunch hour, or wherever you are, you wanted to look at some ICS documents and campaign plans, but the point of this slide is to really bring home the point that we're bringing order to this operation. There's multiple complexities, and so utilizing these standard ICS forms and that information gathering period really helps us as the IRMT to communicate the needs of the researchers and what they want to accomplish, and we can communicate that to the host unit and create a plan where they can safely operate, they can safely collect their data, and we can bring all the synergistic activity and overlaps that we see and connect the people together in order to accomplish the research objectives within the context of the fire management host unit. So we take these research campaign plans where we take that task, purpose, and end state and allow the researchers to inform us of the needs that they have, what their objectives are, what those tasks are that would be needed to accomplish those objectives, and what their desired end state is, and provide that within that incident action plan, these ICS forms that help communicate to everyone on the team what's going to happen. And so like I said, there's quite a bit of pre-planning, months of pre-planning, depending on the complexity, pre-implementation visits to the site, where we pre-established observation points, safe areas for folks who don't need to be within the fire area, but need to, have a safe observation of the operation, and then allows the planning section to create that accountability. And so we understand what our overall objectives are, and where folks are going to be at different times, and then accountability is a huge function of the IRMT to make sure that we know where everyone's at, when they're going to be there, when they're moving, so that we can safely communicate that to the fire management staff of the host unit. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight was air operations. James showed some of the work that we've done with NASA and the Fire Sense program, as well as FASME and some of the other operations that we've done. But with these highly complex operations, aircraft, whether that's flying directly over the prescribed fire, or pre and post burn flights, the PSD operations of the fire management unit to ignite the prescribed fire, as well as the researchers. It's very complex airspace, and we're introducing these complexities into an already complex environment of either a military installation or another stacked airspace. And so the incident management, the IRMT, integrated research management team, provides that oversight and that pre-planning to manage all of that stacked airspace and all of those operations, and to make sure that the communication is clear, that there's a plan, that all the correct permissions and waivers and certifications are lined up. And so when those requests are made of particular types of research or sensors or aircraft, that we can integrate those within the fire environment to safely accomplish those missions. So providing the air operations branch director who is familiar with working within DoD airspace or within a very complex airspace environment, provides that span of control and that clear communication. So as a representation of a typical week at a prescribed fire campaign, the IRMT develops the current plan and provides that briefing to all participants. So we provide opportunities for folks to travel in. We provide a check-in and clear communication. multiple briefings, and then space for researchers to set up their instrumentation, and we coordinate and plan out those events so that we have accountability of where folks are and where they need to visit at what time. Some of that is defined in those pre-implementation visits, and then on burn day, or in between burn days, provide opportunity to get those folks out to set up their research instrumentation. And then we provide printing out opportunities on off-scheduled days to provide co-production events or training events or some side conversations, and really that fellowship that is like James was saying, that opportunity for folks to meet each other and have those conversations around their research and their elevator pitch, or the presentations of their research. So briefly here, these are some of the types of activities that researchers participate in and the measurements that they take. And these are really synergistic with the fire management staff of the host unit, in particular their on-site weather monitoring. We found that, having the subject matter experts in on site has been such a benefit to even educating and providing more detailed fire weather than the host unit was capable of producing on their own. And especially in the environment that we operate in now with reduced staff and reduced time, having a dedicated meteorologist and smoke specialist on site to provide that planning insight has been a value added to the host units that we've been there, that we've participated with. So some of the research that's been going on, pre and post fire and fuels measurements, including terrestrial and aerial LiDAR. And those are resources and data that we can also provide back to the host units, as well as a list of fire measurements and smoke plume measurements that you see there. And we're really interagency. Our partners participate from every federal agency and all the land management agencies, and the IRMT functions as that facilitator of co-production and that link between these agencies as we plan and implement these campaigns. Just wanted to briefly touch on a few things on these specific these specific groups of researchers. So macrometeorology, James talked about some of the logistics, and we talked about multi-complexities of these events. We have folks that need to be either on site directly out in the prescribed fire line, or several miles away from the prescribed fire, collecting a variety of different data, instrumentation setup, vehicle setup, like you've seen here. So the IRMT provides that accountability, the communication to operations, and the link to provide a seamless transition between moving these folks around, the communication of where folks are going to be, instrumentation setup and tear down before the prescribed burn, after the prescribed burn. And so with a lot of moving parts, it's necessary for accountability to know where everyone is. And so then we provide the facilitators to move folks around to provide the opportunities to collect their research. From the surface fire behavior and emissions and embers folks, this is a team, this is a group of folks that need to be within the fire area where the prescribed burn is going to happen before the burn to collect their information and set up their sensors. And so providing facilitators and fire line qualified folks to provide them safe access to the prescribed burn unit, within the unit, communicate to the host unit the operations and when they're complete collecting their data, and then during the prescribed burn, providing opportunities for fire line qualified folks to get out on the prescribed burn, be near their sensors, and they provide a lot of the researchers already fire line qualified, which helps with that experience. And so the IRMT is communicating with those fire line qualified folks and making sure that they're in a safe place and that their mission, their end state is safely obtained. Similarly, with the fuels group, they do a lot of work before the prescribed burn happens, weeks before the prescribed burn happens to collect information and data, and then post burn. So they'll need safe access to the fire area, and so the IRMT facilitates that communication when it's safe to re-enter, and then providing time throughout the operational periods to make sure that they have opportunity to collect the data that they need. And then also provide opportunity for them to communicate that back to the host unit and to other synergistic researchers that are participating in the campaign. And finally, I just wanted to highlight the co-production aspect. Like James hit on this as well. These are multi-day events, multi-week events, opportunities for really concentrated conversations around research. So the Eastern Innovation Landscape Network with Brett Williams as the Eastern Innovation Landscape Network Coordinator and Tech Transfer Specialist. These are opportunities to transfer information, transfer fire science directly to fire practitioners. And that's what we love here at the Ember Alliance, is providing those opportunities and that tech transfer opportunity to take what we're learning in the field and connect it with fire practitioners, whether it's at the host unit or visitors from offsite. And so the campaigns provide opportunities to have workshops, side conversations, and then fellowship together as fire scientists and practitioners, getting to know each other and building that trust that's the foundation for this innovation. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Christian. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So once again, if you joined in the middle of the presentations, my name's Christian Fernandez. I'm an outreach specialist with the Southern Fire Exchange, employed by Tall Timbers Research Station, and I'm joined here by James Furman with the U.S. Forest Service and Dan Galtieri with the Ember Alliance. So at this point in our program, we'd like to take a few minutes to ask questions. Please type your questions in the Q&A tool, and we'll try to get through them with the time that we have available. We have about 10 minutes or so, give or take. And we've enabled a feature in Zoom that allows you to vote for the questions that you find the most interesting. So if you go in that Q&A tool, you can put a thumbs up on the things you find interesting, and that helps us go through which ones are the most important to y'all. So with that, we do have a few questions in the Q&A tool already. First one is a bit of a question on how prescribed fires are done on military lands. The question is from Mark Bumgarner. Since fires caused by live fire occur downrange, where there is maybe dud ammunition, how do you ignite prescribed fires? Are most campaign fires downrange or primarily maneuver in the training area?
I can take that one, although Dan could also take it. Yeah, there are areas on military installations that you simply don't go to if they are on fire. But most military installations also have wide swaths of forest where there is little to no risk of UXO or unexploded ordnance. And so that is where we go. Safety being paramount, yeah, we simply do not carry out or participate in prescribed fires that are anywhere near those dudded areas. So yeah, a good question because yeah, Dan and I both having worked at Eglin, we can tell you horror stories about wildfires there, but we digress.
Dan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, we've touched on quite a bit about accountability and the function of the IRMT to provide safe access for folks to participate in prescribed fire. And so much pre-planning and identified prescribed fire units. That's how we're functioning on an installation with a huge amount of pre-planning and accountability for where folks can and can't go. So that is a core function of the IRMT to provide that safe access.
All right. Our next question is from Brian Potter. The IRMT is a major contribution to research efforts like FASME. It's currently designed, rightly so, for burning in service of research. The Central Washington pilot project is just wrapping up, and that was much more of a matter of research in service of burning. I think there's a conversation to be had about whether the IRMT could be adapted to be applicable for both situations, or something different should be developed for the latter situations. Thoughts on those options?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the initiative that he is talking about, but would certainly entertain a conversation. I'd need a little more information on what all's involved. But I mean, the IRMT and the incident command system in general is very adaptable, and the members that we have on the IRMT are, you know, happy to branch out and take on a challenge. So the short answer would be uh, quite possibly, and happy to entertain conversation along those lines.
Dan, did you have anything you want to add?
No, thank you.
And as a reminder, everyone, we'll have the emails to from our speakers at the end of the presentation. So
All right. I said Brian Potter said he'll be in touch. So sounds good, Brian. We'll talk later.
sounds good. Um, Next question we have from Brett Williams. What incentives do fire managers have to host or participate in these Wildland Fire Science Initiative and other campaign burns? Dan mentioned a few, but what are the ancillary benefits to a fire manager from the campaign and or working with the IRMT?
Yeah. Do you want to take that one, Dan?
Yeah, I can
For
take that one.
starters?
For starters, yeah. So one is we're there to have a small, the smallest footprint that we can, so there's no impact to the current operations of the prescribed fire host unit. And so then we provide some force multiplier to provide continued operations of their prescribed fire mission, and so they can still accomplish acres, continue moving along their program, and so that we can have that synergy. Some of the ancillary benefits that we provide are, some of that feedback information. So, we're asking fire practitioners what they want out of fire science, and then it's really that co-production, that the direct input into the next generation of fire tools that are going to be used by those host units. Those fire practitioners get hands-on training. Either through the campaign itself, or follow on workshops and conversations, and those relationships that are being built. Fire scientists get that opportunity to build those relationships, and there's many examples of after the campaign, of revisits and continued conversations of those training opportunities.
Yeah. And I would add that these campaigns really offer the host unit fire manager and fire management team an opportunity to have impact, positive impact at the national level as these tools are being developed based on their inputs on what the practitioner needs from these next generation physics-based models that are, rapidly getting ready to come online. What needs to be in the graphic user interface? How can it be most user friendly where it answers the questions that they have? And them being able to talk directly with, Rod Lynn from Los Alamos National Laboratory, who develops fire tech, who's been a key player in development of quick fire, to figure out how to make those tools most useful. That's a rare opportunity for someone that works on a particular piece of ground somewhere. And I would also add that don't tell anybody, but these campaigns are fun. I mean, they are really, the synergy of all the researchers that are there, the interactions that take place. Um, yeah, there's a lot that goes on there, and Fort Stewart has hosted, a number of these campaigns so far. I think they have also used it as part of an award submission. They haven't heard back whether they won the award within DoD, but it's something that really showcases and highlights their program uh, on a national stage.
I can definitely echo that they're very fun. Um, Next question we have is from Kara Yedinek. Could you speak to the base funding and available time needed to keep the IRMT functioning? And I would add on to this question with my own question. What does it take for someone to hire the IRMT?
Yeah, it's great questions. And hey, Cara, glad that you were able to make the call today. And Cara also helps make these campaigns fun because she's a great guitar player and singer, by the way. Um, but as far as funding, we've been funded primarily up to this point through ESTCP and FireSense. NASA's FireSense program has kicked in and provided funding. There are already other conversations going on from uh, the other parts within NASA that may be funding for the IRMT. But most of the members of the IRMT work with the Ember Alliance, nonprofit, and getting an agreement in place and funds to the Ember Alliance. Of course, conversations need to take place ahead of time to manage workloads and that sort of thing. But work with the Ember Alliance. You can work with myself and Dan as primary points of contact, and yeah, happy to help. Like I say, has also been funded obviously by U.S. Forest Service for the FASME burns, but it wouldn't even have to be federal funding necessarily. If there was a very, a state that had a budget for research and wanted to do these type of things, it could very easily be state funded or funded by, if the Nature Conservancy wanted to host IRMT for some of the burns that they've hosted, like at Sycan Marsh, they could work
Mhm.
with the Ember Alliance. So yeah,
Mhm.
lots of different ways to get funding, but primarily through the Ember Alliance, but also Forest Service is helpful for having that reach back capacity if we need to plus up for a large campaign.
Yeah, and I'll add, with us being an NGO and like I mentioned before, leveraging our unique position within the fire management space. We have that base funding, gratefully through our partnerships with Forest Service and CERTIP and ESTCP, and then follow on funding for specific campaigns or specific complexities that we aren't, necessarily funded up to, and then we have, let's dream and think about things that we want to do, and then we find opportunities to leverage our uniqueness in this space to utilize our skill set, utilize what the IRMT brings, and then find it follow-on funding to do things like participation and coordination with NASA and FireSense. Would be a great example of how we've had our base funding, and then follow-on agreements to kick off a campaign that was a little bit more specific to what those needs were.
Well, unfortunately, we reached the end of our time. Thank you both so much for being here. Do you have any final comments or mic drop statements you want to make before we close out here?
Well, I just wanted to thank Southern Fire Exchange again for uh, allowing us the opportunity to showcase what the IRMT has has been up to, kind of where we came from, what's been accomplished, and I'll just say it's been really a highlight in my career to be able to lead this effort, and I believe that after I retire in a year and a half or so, I believe it'll continue to go on strongly because the need is there, all the pieces are in place, and long live prescribed fire science.
Thank you, James, and I'll just add, the thank you to Fire Science, the Southern Fire Exchange, and all of our partners and funders. The Amber Alliance is proud to host the IRMT and be uh, leaders in this space, and we're excited about what's to come as we scale this operation and we scale this idea. The framework of supporting fire science and practitioners and that co-production, it's so needed, and really connecting fire science and fire managers is something that we're passionate about, and we're thankful for all of our partners for giving us this platform.
And thank you guys. We're going to go ahead and share our last screen here. If you all want to reach out to James Furman or Dan Galtieri, you can go ahead and email them at the emails on the screen. Um, so thank you, everyone, and we hope that this webinar was useful in your fire management programs. And thank you to James and Dan for being here. Have a great afternoon, everyone.